So one of the first things that you mentioned there is kind of the mindset and the behavioral psychology and that sort of angle. So in terms of mindset, what do you think are kind of the most important features of a mindset that will help with success?
Well, I'll definitely venture into that, even though that is not my realm.
Okay.
I have learned a lot over the years thanks to my colleague, Dr. Terry Lance, and I've done her master classes. I've done her healthy habit courses. I
Hmm.
benefit just as much, if not more, from all of her teachings as our clients have. It's even impacted the way I parent. Whereas
Okay.
I'm more geared towards a more positive parenting solution. And so I've learned a ton. Every time that I do one of her master classes or do one of her courses, my husband and I actually always listen to her stuff together. She's a good friend of mine. We always listen to her stuff together, and the takeaway is always that you can really apply this to everyday life, not just the way that you eat. But I think if I could just break it down into because of course I'm not Terry and I can never explain or teach the way that she would. But if I could just break it down, I think it's the realization that first of all of these people that have metabolic syndrome and all these expressions of metabolic syndrome, it's not their fault. It's not because they've been gluttons and lazy. It's not because they've eaten too much and not exercised enough that they got to the point where they got. It's because of our current society, the current way of eating, our influences. We are constantly bombarded with unhealthy information, unhealthy, uh, more and more processed stuff. We have all these gyms and all of these more and more, every year there's more and more gyms around. People are trying to exercise more, but at the same time, we are bombarded with so much processed stuff and processed information. So even when people start a diet, most diets out there are filled with processed stuff, processed shakes and processed packaged foods for every diet out there. And so it's really just working on the concept that we have to change our relationship with food, that we have to focus on eating real whole foods and foods that we love and love us back, not the foods that the food industry wants us to love and keep on eating. And so there's a lot just there alone. And then of course Terry talks about all kinds of stuff, being your own self coach, self sabotage, and why this happens. There's a lot of components to the things that we have learned and are doing as a team and as a community. What Terry has in our program, or what our program offers to our community, is that she creates these weekly healthy habit challenges. So as a community, every week you're working on something positive towards your healthier habits. And that there's a lot to that. She has things like creating a list of what are your foods, and looking at things and saying, these are my foods. And when you walk past an aisle or a restaurant, recognizing that those other things that you do not want to eat and don't love you back are not your food. These are your foods. Just simple, very simple, healthy strategies that you can implement. And as again, I'm repeating Terry here, as she says, these are simple strategies, but at the same time, they're not easy. They're hard, but we can do hard things and we can learn to do hard things. And really, ultimately, people realize that it's not their fault. It's not their fault that they can't control uh, how many pizza slices they eat. It's not their fault that they can't control how many chips they eat once they open a package. These processed foods are created and formulated so that you will eat more and more and more of it. It has a hormonal impact on you. It's not about willpower. It's really about understanding this and making the right choices in order to help balance your hormones and your response to foods.
I like that a lot. Yeah, I think that's a really big component of it for a lot of people. Maybe even more so for women, is kind of the feeling of shame and guilt about being overweight and like, oh, why am I such a bad person, and all this stuff, which kind of creates a difficult kind of landscape for making improvements in some cases. So yeah, just kind of getting rid of the shame, no blame kind of attitude, and just realizing that we're in a minefield with all the like the messages and all the processed food and literally every street corner. has either a fast food restaurant or a convenience store or something else that's similar.
Or
And
a
so,
billboard.
yeah.
And every time you turn on the TV, every time you scroll through your social media, you're constantly being bombarded with this processed food. And at times, these healthier this and healthier that, and
Mm-hmm.
low calorie this and low sugar that. And all of these things, all they do is they manipulate your hormones so that you feel hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. And just to finish off, Terry,
Mm-hmm.
in our program, we really do focus a whole lot on teaching people how to speak to yourself and how to practice positive self-talk. This is a huge component. We have not been taught to do that. We are very critical of ourselves, and really that self coaching, that self love, that positive self talk, and that positive reinforcement is super important, not just for children, but for ourselves as adults.